by state in all legislation, usually preceded by the words this or in this, i.e., this state or in this state. The term state in each of the foregoing examples means literally District of Columbia, i.e., State of California equals District of Columbia of California, etc. Most Americans believe that they live in the United States. Not according to the IRC. When used in a geographical sense, the term United States means the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, Guam, American Samoa, and the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands, and the District of Columbia, and no other thing. The reference to United States is a statutory reference to the exclusive jurisdiction of the national government, which is well known as the District of Columbia. So when you see United States, think the District of Columbia. The biggest secret in America and most important term in the IRC, around which literally everything revolves, is United States. The controlling definition of the IRC terms United States and state is found in IRC Section 7701, which provides in pertinent part, A. When used in this title, where not otherwise distinctly expressed, United States. The term United States, when used in a geographical sense, includes only the states and the District of Columbia. The terms includes and including, when used in a definition contained in this title, shall not be deemed to exclude other things otherwise within the meaning of the term defined. State. The term state shall be construed to include the District of Columbia. Following the Roaring Twenties, easy loans of credit and digits after the Federal Reserve Act, the savings, wealth, and estates of millions of Americans are wiped out by the Goldsmith-Bankster-orchestrated stock market crash of 1929 and Great Depression. Many Americans, especially the elderly, are unable to provide for their own needs. In an apparent act of benevolence, Congress institutes a solution for this terrible state of affairs, a personal retirement program of the government of the United States in what is called the Social Security Act of August 14, 1935. In order for the federal government to tax a citizen of one of the several states, they had to create a contractual nexus. This contractual nexus is called Social Security. The federal government always does everything according to principles of laws. In 1935, the federal government instituted Social Security. The Social Security Board then created 10 Social Security districts, creating a federal area which covered the several states like an overlay. In 1939, the federal government instituted the Public Salary Tax Act of 1939, which is a municipal law of the District of Columbia, taxing all federal and state government employees and those who live and work in any federal area. Now, the government knows it cannot tax those citizens who live and work outside the territorial jurisdiction of Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17, or Article 4, Section 3, Clause 2. So, in 1940, Congress passed the Buck Act. This act allowed any department of the federal government to create a federal area for imposition of the Public Salary Tax Act of 1939, The imposition of this tax is at 4 U.S.C.S. Section 111, and the rest of the taxing law is in Title 26 of the Internal Revenue Code. The Social Security Board had already created an overlay of a federal area. As a result, the federal government created federal states, which are exactly like the sovereign states, occupy the same territory and boundaries, but whose names are capitalized versions of the sovereign states. Remember that proper names and proper nouns in the English language have only the first letter capitalized. For example, the federal state of California, all caps, is overlaid upon the sovereign state of California, proper name. Further, it is designated by the federal abbreviation of capital CA instead of the sovereign state abbreviation of CALIF period. So too is Arizona designated AZ instead of the lawful abbreviation of ARIZ, etc. If you use a two-letter capitalized abbreviation, you are declaring that the location is under the jurisdiction of the federal government instead of the powers of the sovereign state. As a result of creating these shadow states, the federal government assumes that every area is a federal area and that the citizens therein are federal citizens. What is not generally disclosed to the American people is that this program has all the elements of what is defined in law as a Ponzi scheme. Participants retain no accrued property rights to their contributions to the program. Anyone entitled to receive Social Security retirement or survivor benefits, a franchise and political right, upon acceptance of which right from the political District of Columbia, establishes legal residence in the geographical District of Columbia and becomes a member of the class defined as federal personnel and United States government employee. B. So-called individual and citizen of the United States. C. So-called person with political and civil rights conferred by Congress. D. Subject of all legislation within the District of Columbia, doing business as United States. E. Citizen of the federal government, political District of Columbia. And F. Taxpayer, personally liable, voluntary servitude, for payment of his fair share of the interest on the national debt incurred by Congress and owed to the Federal Reserve in the form of income tax. Using the pretext of a retirement program, U.S. government intended to induce me to remain silent and thereby give my apparent consent to the Social Security contract in order to deceptively transform me into a member of the class defined as federal personnel, a U.S. government employee, and citizen, a political franchisee, and subject of the political municipally incorporated District of Columbia, and therefore a so-called citizen of the United States and taxpayer, whose life, liberty, and property the U.S. government exercise absolute legislative, judicial, and executive power and jurisdiction. 2. Obligate me as a constructive citizen of the District of Columbia with legal residence therein to pay interest in the form of income tax on the national debt incurred by Congress and owed to private businessmen, and 3. Make me responsible for the funding of Social Security retirement, survivor, and disabled benefits to third parties whom I do not know in order to attract more payroll taxpayers into the Social Security retirement program, and thereby more income taxpayers to pay interest on the national debt incurred by Congress and owed to private businessmen. Anyone upon whom government confers the franchise of that certain political right to receive Social Security, retirement, or survivor benefits, whether former slave or former sovereign, and who accepts the said franchise, as in, you can't get a job without a Social Security number. We require a Social Security number for a 1099 before we can pay you. You can't remove your newborn from the hospital until he has a Social Security number. We cannot issue a driver's license without a Social Security number, etc., and is entitled to said political right, acquires legal residence in the District of Columbia, and is a subject of all legislation within the District of Columbia, citizen of the federal government, and a taxpayer liable for payment of his fair share of interest on the national debt incurred by Congress and owed to the Federal Reserve, a private, tax-exempt, for-profit business run by foreign principals in the form of income and other taxes. Unless something changes, America shall go the way of Britannia, before her and the Goldsmith-Bankster parasites will run their war on mankind through their next host, China, with current administrative headquarters in the World Bank, District of Columbia. Prior to Social Security, Supreme Court justices refer to the American people as sovereigns and non-taxpayers, and America has only peace officers, whose job is to keep the peace under the common law. Upon arrival of the Social Security political movement in 1935, Americans begin volunteering en masse at an increasing rate to assume the status of taxpayer, and soon thereafter registering as a type of latent criminal known as a driver, and paying a tax for the privilege to travel voluntarily, placing themselves in constant danger of arrest at the hands of law enforcement officers for alleged violation of driving regulations. The District of Columbia Municipal Corporation Social Security Motor Vehicle Constructive Trust provides the Goldsmith-Banksters and their debtors' servant proxies with 1. Subject matter jurisdiction over the paycheck, bank account, and property of every Social Security franchisee via the Taxpayer Identification Number, and 2. Personal jurisdiction over every Social Security franchisee via occupational certificate to operate a motor vehicle for commercial purposes on the highway as a driver in the transportation of passengers, passengers and property or cargo. Liberation occurs upon one's presentation of proof that his apparent consent in the Social Security contract was given and obtained through his mistake, based on, among other things, misrepresentation and willful concealment of material risks, duties, and facts by officers, employees, and elected officials of the United States, rendering impossible a meeting of the minds, thus constituting sufficient grounds for unilateral extinguishment of the Social Security contract by rescission, as authorized by law. The provisions of the Driver's License Compact constitute irrefutable evidence that each respective Union State member DMV is an instrumentality of the District of Columbia, and each Union State member government a political subdivision of the District of Columbia. The Driver's License Compact is an agreement among states that obligates member jurisdictions to exchange information about an individual's driving history.